Disagreements in a team are natural. A team might have the best chemistry among its members, but would still disagree occasionally. However, the important thing is how they ultimately resolve those disagreements. In today's video, we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers admitting frustration over LaFleur's play calls in the fourth quarter against the Cowboys, and if the Packers could bench Rodgers for Jordan Love. First off, all about Aaron Rodgers' frustration. The Green Bay Packers had one hell of a game against the Cowboys recently that ended up going into overtime. The Packers ultimately won the game 31-28. That broke their 5-game losing streak. As thrilling as the game was, it was full of drama. One of the many dramatic things to happen was the veteran Packers QB getting frustrated with the head coach, Matt LaFleur. He was visibly frustrated with the coach's conservative approach in the late game that ended up forcing the match into overtime. The broadcast captured the close-up of an intense exchange between the signal caller and the coach on the sidelines after the third down play call. Aaron was later asked about the whole episode in a presser. The signal caller stated that at every call in those last minutes, he felt that they were just 30 yards short of ending the game in regulation. He added that he wanted to throw the ball and take his chances for a win, rather than resorting to a defensive mindset. The veteran admitted that while he didn't have many attempts in the game, he felt to be in pretty good form, yet the coach insisted on playing it safe, ultimately forcing the Packers into overtime against the Cowboys. Good thing they ended up winning the game. Up next, the plays in question. The tussle began later in the fourth quarter when there was still 1 minute and 38 seconds of play left. The Packers took over at their 33-yard line after a Cowboys punt. The coach called 2 straight runs before a pass on the 3rd and 1. Yet the runs ran the clock down to 30 seconds, and the pass toward the end fell incomplete. Moving forward, the Packers punted it back to the Cowboys, who couldn't run the ball down the field. They never made it into the field goal range, and the Packers ultimately bagged the victory in overtime. But the important thing to note here is that they could have done that, and that's exactly why Aaron was so frustrated. He believed that a passing play earlier would have been a better call, and that the Packers could have won it earlier. Maybe the Packers could have made it earlier with a more aggressive play, or it could have backfired. We would never know. Nevertheless, the good news is, despite the disagreement, it all worked out for the good in the end, and the two settled the whole thing there and then. Moving on, LaFleur's response to the whole thing. Needless to say that the coach was over the moon with the victory. It was an awesome game that lifted a long curse and boosted the morale of everyone in the franchise. But the top man himself admitted that there was some indecision on his part toward the end. He highlighted that the Cowboys had 3 timeouts left with them, and he was worried about giving them the ball with too much time on the clock. Notwithstanding the veteran's experience and skill, if Rodgers had thrown a couple of incompletions, they could have been punting it back to the Cowboys. Now that would have been a dangerous situation. The coach stated while talking to journalists that his calls didn't work out at that particular moment. However, the team managed to win the game, and that's what mattered the most. He remarked that during these situations, Aaron was mostly afforded the liberty to call the plays on his own. He appreciated the signal caller, saying that typically he made good use of that freedom. However, LaFleur admitted that he took matters into his own hands this time, and it was all on him. It was a crucial game for the Packers, and the stakes were just too high. They had lost the past 5 games straight, and everyone was under a lot of pressure. It's natural that the coach and the signal caller ran into a disagreement on how to proceed. In both their defenses, they both wanted the best for the team. Fortunately, it didn't end up going south, because otherwise, this little thing would have exploded into something else. Let's talk about, will the Packers bench Aaron Rodgers for Jordan Love? First off, why would the Packers want to bench Aaron? A couple of months back, this question would have never come into anyone's mind, let alone come up in a discussion. But things have changed drastically ever since the start of the season. The Packers entered this season with expectations of being the best team, but quite the opposite. They have been quashed, thrashed, and battered. They went 3-6 on the season and lost 5 straight games. While the franchise has struggled on the offense due to the departure of Davante Adams, it's also true that the defense has had its shortcomings as well. Nevertheless, every expert out there agrees that Aaron hasn't been himself for the most part of this season. Just recently, he threw a career-high 3 interceptions during a game, and no sir, they couldn't be blamed on the receiving group because most of them ended up landing on the opposing defenders' helmets. So while it's true that the thought of replacing the great Aaron Rodgers with a newbie sounds completely insane, these are some unusual circumstances. Nobody could have foretold that such a time would ever dawn on the Packers. Moving on, would they do it? Would the Packers swap Aaron for Jordan Love? That's the big question. And the answer to this would have been pretty easy, if not for the last game against the Packers. Anyway, fortunately for the team and Rodgers fans, it's highly unlikely that the Packers would bench him to swap in Jordan Love. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, as we all know, that the veteran has made a banging comeback in the game against the Cowboys. He put on display a magnificent set of skills as a QB. Every one of his throws and each one of the plays was just a treat to watch. So it would be crazy for the team to ditch him now after sticking with him over the worst form of his career. Secondly, and more importantly, it's also a question of if they could. And the answer is a big fat no, at least not outright. Why? Because they need to be on good terms with the QB as far as 2023 is concerned due to his contract, which is virtually immovable in the year. Up next, how could his contract prevent a change of QBs? His contract is probably the biggest reason the franchise has put up with his below-par performance so long this season. Aaron is currently on a 3-year contract worth $50.3 million annually that he signed with the franchise this offseason. Trading or releasing him during the 2023 offseason would mean a $99.8 million dead cap hit for the franchise, which no businessman in their right mind could stomach. In simpler terms, it would mean eating up almost $100 million in cap space, despite Rodgers not being on the team roster. So ultimately, the franchise wouldn't be able to spend much on improving its team. Having said that, there still could be some loopholes that the franchise could exploit. Let's talk about them. Lastly, how could it still be done? There are 2 ways the Packers could go around the contract. With the first one, there are a lot of ifs and buts associated with this possibility, but it's still there no matter how long a shot. Anyway, if the Packers can find a team willing to pick up Aaron's option bonus, they can trade him without taking a big hit. But, and it's a big but, it would be more difficult than one might think because the QB is already 38 years old. Not to mention that he's probably having the worst season of his career. And that's not the only difficult part here. Even if they are able to find someone willing to take up his option bonus, the Packers themselves wouldn't be getting anything worthy in return. And that might be a far more bitter pill to swallow. The second and safer way for the franchise to swap Aaron for Love lies in benching him due to an injury. Reportedly, the QB has been playing with a thumb injury ever since week 7. Yes, it's not that big a deal, but it has impacted his performance and that of the team hugely. He himself admitted that his thumb has been feeling worse ever since he suffered the injury. It could be a perfect excuse for the management to bench the veteran without causing too much of a problem with him. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on Aaron's frustration with LaFleur's play calls? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.